You know, it's genuinely amazing seeing so many people excited for the Mario movie. It feels like for years gamers have waited for Nintendo to attempt to enter the world of cinema. But what if I told you that this wasn't the first time that the Big N had graced the silver screen? No, and I mean even before that movie. This is the story of how Nintendo and Universal teamed up almost 33 years before the animated Mario movie to give us The Wizard. The Wizard is a 1989 movie directed by Todd Holland and distributed by Universal Pictures. It stars Fred Savage, Jenny Lewis, and Luke Edwards and is about a nonverbal, highly implied autistic boy named Jimmy that is broken out of his mental institution by his older brother Corey, and the two set off on a trip to California. Along the way, they meet Haley, played by Jenny Lewis, and discover that Jimmy is amazing at video games. They decide to travel together, hustling people out of their money along the way to make sure Jimmy can compete in the Video Armageddon tournament. Along the way, they get chased by a creepy PI and make sure to advertise plenty, and I mean plenty, of Nintendo products. But I'm getting ahead of myself. How did this movie come to be? In 1989, Nintendo was on top of the world. The release of the Game Boy and the NES had set the world on fire, and Nintendo was the one holding the matches. But a snag had hit their stride when the world experienced a shortage of ROM chips that delayed the distribution of several Nintendo products outside of Japan. This included the Power Glove and most famously, Super Mario Bros. 3. At the same time, Universal Studios producer Tom Pollock was working on producing, in his words, a video game version of Tommy but for younger audiences. Tommy is a rock opera based on the Who album of the same name, which is about a deaf, mute, and blind boy who becomes a pinball champion and a religious leader of sorts. I guess I didn't see it. Pollock approached Nintendo about featuring their products for promotion in the movie. Nintendo liked the idea and licensed their upcoming products, and so Universal and Nintendo were in business. The wheels were spinning fast, with director Todd Holland brought on and having to begin shooting the movie just a mere 5 weeks after he agreed to take the job. The rush being due to Fred Savage's very busy TV schedule shooting The Wonder Years at the time, giving them a very tight time frame on when they could start and finish the movie. Nintendo would license their products to Universal, and The Wizard would be the first time American audiences would get a glimpse at a number of soon-to-come Nintendo products, with the Power Glove and Mario 3 being the most famous. It's also highly implied that the Video Armageddon tournament was inspired by Nintendo's own championships that they were doing at the time. For those unaware, the Power Glove was a very early attempt by Nintendo to implement motion controls into video games. However, it was largely a dud because, motion controls in 1989 weren't that great. Who would have thought? Mario 3 would feature in the movie's climax at the Video Armageddon tournament as the final game, which was also held at Universal Studios theme park, and of course they had to have a ridiculous chase sequence showing off all the park's attractions, really making sure to get in all that promo that they could. A really funny note on the climax of the movie is that even though it's the first time Mario 3 is being shown, not just to us the audience, but to the characters as well, they all know the mechanics and rules of the game. They're constantly shouting stuff out to Jimmy the entire time as if they had played it before. According to Holland, Nintendo was surprisingly hands-off when it came to things like the script and the shoot, with their main concern being the way in which the products were featured, making sure that there was a rep on set to not only safeguard the products, but to also make sure that they were being featured favorably, such as in the now very famous Power Glove scene.
I love the Power Glove. It's so bad.
And you can certainly tell Nintendo didn't have much to do with this script. There are quite a few jokes in this movie that I don't think family-friendly Nintendo would be quite so happy with had they had more control.
He touched my breast!
In order to really make sure that they got every ounce of marketing potential that they could out of the movie, Nintendo also provided theaters with a version of their Nintendo Power magazine called Pocket Power, which included a making-of featurette on the movie, a profile of Fred Savage, and of course a catalog of 20 brand new NES and Game Boy games. Oh, and there also happened to be a 2-page spread on the Power Glove. The film would come out in December of 1989 and would go on to make $14 million in the box office off a budget of $6 million, making it a moderate success for the studio, but hardly the major blockbuster that they had hoped when they casted Fred Savage and got the Nintendo products to be featured. Most critics dismissed it as a 90-minute Nintendo commercial. So what did I think? This is probably one of the stranger movies I think I've ever watched, and I don't even mean in a subject matter sense, but in a how does this exist sense. Over on my Twitter, I described it as both very cynical and cavity-inducingly sweet. You can't help but feel the massive Mario-shaped marketing shadow looming over you while you watch, demanding that you beg your parents for a Power Glove. But then in the following scene, the kids are being so saccharine and overly sweet that you want to see them be safe, and for the love of God, just get home. Tonally, the movie is all over the place too. The movie opens with the kids on the run, and while the adults do go looking for them, there's such a lack of urgency from any of them, save for the creepy PI character that gets hired by Jimmy's mom. The boy's dad goes looking for them, but never really seems in a rush, and seemingly heavy subject matter is brought up and then just sort of dismissed within the same scene, like Christian Slater's character Nick's drinking problem. 1 second, the father played by Beau Bridges is worried about finding his sons, but instead of working with the PI that Jimmy's mom and stepdad have hired to find Jimmy, he decides to almost commit vehicular manslaughter against him because he wants to find them first, I guess? Like, why not pay him to bring all 3 of them home instead of just Jimmy? It's all very odd. It's just sort of brought up randomly also that Haley, played by Jenny Lewis's mom, has a gambling problem and isn't in the picture anymore, and that her trucker father just sort of dropped her off at a bus station to get back home to Reno all by herself. It's like the movie has all these ideas but then never really knows what to do with them. The way the movie handles Jimmy's character too is particularly odd. It's highly implied that Jimmy is autistic, and I do want to say I don't think the movie goes out of its way to be overly offensive, but I do think that there was a serious lack of understanding of what being on the spectrum is. It's highly implied that Jimmy seeing his twin sister drown is what made him, quote-unquote, autistic. But that's also not how autism works. People are born autistic. Being a part of something traumatic can certainly have an adverse effect on someone and affect their ability to communicate and connect with others, but what it doesn't do is make them an almost magical video game savant. It's important to note that the movie never uses the word autistic when describing Jimmy. However, they use a number of characteristics seen in people on the spectrum to characterize his disability, to the point where it's widely accepted by fans that he is, and it's hard not to think that's not what the movie wants you to believe. I think at the end of the day, Jimmy's disability feels more like a device to push the plot along, rather than part of his character. It seems the wizard's heart was in the right place, but perhaps in 1989, the way people wrote about this stuff wasn't up to today's standards. All that being said, The Wizard is a fun watch. I wouldn't necessarily say it's good, but it's super interesting watching what are essentially 2 very different movies get made at the same time. One being Universal and Nintendo's need for what is essentially a giant toy commercial, and the other being Todd Holland's little movie about a broken family going on an adventure and trying to find a way to come back together again. It feels uniquely of its time and place, and was just one of those movies where the more it went on, the more I kept saying, what is happening? But, you know, it must have worked because I do sort of want a Power Glove now, I guess. Also, random side note, did you know that Tobey Maguire has like a 3-second cameo towards the end of the movie? He doesn't say anything and he's only there for a little bit, but he's one of the henchmen of the movie's antagonist, so yeah, Bully Maguire, he's spanning generations. Hey everyone, I hope you liked this little history lesson and review of a movie that I'm sure Nintendo would much rather you forget. This was a super fun video to make and to do research for, so if there are any other forgotten video game movies that you think I should do a retrospective review on, let me know in the comment section below and make sure to hit the subscribe button. While you're at it, check out one of these other videos that I've made, and I'll see you next time. Bye!